Hey everyone, and welcome back. I love our deep dives, and today's going to be especially interesting. We're going to tackle a question that, well, let's just say it's a bit controversial.
Oh, yeah. Definitely controversial.
You guys sent in some amazing material for this one, too. We've got excerpts from a pretty heavy political analysis comparing different systems, plus articles from Brookings, Science News, and even The Conversation.
Yeah, a great mix of sources. And they really highlight the fact that both systems we're looking at, they've got their pluses and minuses.
Exactly. So no picking sides here. We're just going to lay it all out and let you guys decide what you think.
Right. The best way to start might be with kind of the fundamental ideas behind each system, like what makes each one tick.
Awesome. So let's kick things off with democracy. In a nutshell, what's at the heart of it all?
Well, democracy is about, people power, right? Putting power in the hands of the people. And it's all about individual rights and freedoms.
Yeah.
Things like being able to speak your mind, getting together with others, a free press.
Right. Freedom of speech, the right to assemble, all that good stuff.
Exactly. I mean, think about the last time you posted something opinionated online, or maybe you went to a town hall meeting. Those are your democratic rights in action.
Makes sense. Yeah. And it makes you realize how important these freedoms are. It's one thing to read about them, but it's another to actually experience them.
Totally. It's interesting to consider how much these rights impact our daily lives. I mean, even just the ability to criticize the government without fear of reprisal, that's huge.
Yeah, that's something we often take for granted. So speaking of government, where does the idea of accountability fit into all of this?
Accountability, that's like the cornerstone of democracy. It means the government has to answer to the people. And that happens through elections, obviously, but also through checks and balances.
Check and balances.
Yeah, these systems that make sure no one person or group gets too powerful. It's a bit like, well, imagine a three-legged stool. You've got the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch.
Right, right.
And each one has the power to kind of keep the others in check. So no one branch can just run wild and do whatever they want.
Got it. So it's all about making sure the government actually serves the people, not the other way around.
Exactly. It's like a delicate dance.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
But that dance, ideally, leads to a more responsive government.
It's fascinating to consider how these principles actually play out in the real world.
Absolutely. And all these freedoms combined with this idea of accountability, they often lead to innovation and progress.
How so?
Well, when people from all walks of life can speak their minds and debate ideas openly, you get more creative solutions. New advancements in science, technology, art, all sorts of fields.
So democracy is like a breeding ground for progress. Okay, I can see that. But let's be real, no system is perfect.
Yeah.
And some of the articles you shared, they brought up some potential downsides to democracy too.
Right, right. There are definitely some criticisms, and some of them are, well, they're pretty valid.
Yeah, one that stuck out to me was how slow and messy the decision-making process can be in a democracy.
Yeah, that's a big one. It takes time to build consensus. You've got different opinions, different interests. Everyone wants their voice heard. And that can lead to gridlock, especially when you need to act fast.
It's true. It's like trying to herd cats sometimes.
Uh-huh, exactly. In a world that's constantly changing and full of complex problems, that slow pace can be a real problem.
I remember reading about a local initiative to improve public transportation. It got bogged down for years because of all these disagreements and bureaucratic hurdles. It's a classic example of democratic gridlock.
Oh, yeah, I can totally see that. Makes you wonder if sometimes a more streamlined approach would be better.
Right. But then you start to think about who would be in charge of that streamlined approach.
Well, and that brings us to another potential pitfall, populism.
Yes. Populism, where charismatic leaders can sometimes, well, they appeal to emotions rather than offering practical solutions. We've seen this happen throughout history, haven't we?
Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, when leaders exploit people's fears and anxieties, it can lead to policies that, well, they might not be in the best long-term interests of the nation.
And that ties into what Gupta was saying in that Science News article, right?
Oh, absolutely.
About how U.S. democracy might actually be declining with all the political polarization going on.
Yep. And the source material also mentions that it's a worrying trend because when a society gets so divided, it's really hard to find common ground.
Makes sense. It's like everyone's retreating into their own corners, and no one's willing to listen to each other anymore.
Right, and that weakens democratic institutions. It makes it easier for those very issues like populism to take root and grow.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the potential downsides of democracy. What about the other side of the coin? What are the arguments in favor of authoritarianism? Because there must be some, right?
Right. Some people argue that authoritarian systems, with their ability to make quick decisions, to act decisively, can be more efficient. And they can implement long-term plans without having to worry about election cycles.
So they can focus on the long game, not just the next election. Interesting.
Exactly. And this can be appealing in times of crisis when you need to act fast.
That makes sense.
And some authoritarian regimes have actually seen pretty impressive economic growth and development.
The source material talks about China a lot in this context, right?
Yeah, they often point to China as an example. Their rapid economic development under an authoritarian regime is something people often cite. They say it shows the potential for growth under this kind of system.
Okay. But while efficiency and stability might sound good on paper, I can't help but think about the trade-offs. What about individual rights and freedoms under an authoritarian system?
That's the big question, isn't it? The source material is pretty clear that those things often take a backseat in authoritarian regime.
Right, that makes sense.
They're known for suppressing dissent, controlling information, limiting personal freedoms, and for a lot of people, that's simply unacceptable.
It's a tough dilemma. It's almost like choosing between two paths, and neither one is ideal. Democracy has its potential for gridlock and populism, while authoritarianism can lead to oppression and limited freedoms.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. What's best for one society might not be right for another. You have to consider their history, their culture, their economic circumstances. It's not one size fits all.
Definitely not. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the most important thing is realizing there's no right answer. Both democracy and authoritarianism, they have their pros and cons. The key is understanding those nuances and being able to have informed discussions about how to create systems of governance that truly work for the people.
That's such a great point. As we end this, I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. Do you think the potential benefits of an authoritarian system, like efficiency and stability, outweigh the risk to individual freedoms? How do you weigh the challenges faced by democracies, like political polarization, against the potential for progress and individual expression? We've talked about China and the United States, but honestly, the question of which system is better is, well, it's complicated.
It really is. And as a final thought to ponder, think about how technology is shaping the world. How will these systems adapt and change? Will technology make democracy stronger? Or will it give authoritarian regimes even more control?
Wow, that's a lot to consider. Big thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.